Why are you trying to eat out of the saucer, darling? The ridiculous thing is that somebody has picked upon this as being a bad aspect of childcare, when it's as much an aspect of childcare as kissing and cuddling your children. It's tremendously important for it to be moderate, which in the overwhelming number of cases it is moderate. And it's tremendously important that parents are not apologetic about it, because children pick that up and feel instantly at an advantage and their parents at a disadvantage, and that's fatal for all authority.
In fact, Lynette thinks it's silly that she has to defend herself for smacking her children. She believes that we'll look back on the idea of not smacking as a mere fad of the 1990s. And she feels so strongly about the need for common sense in parenting that she's written a book in which she explains why even very small children need to be smacked.
It starts as soon as they're old enough to get into trouble, because if a child, like 3 of mine, walked when they were 10 months, so they were all over the place. And it was a question of when they could reach up to pull the teapot off the table, which would scald them. It's just a quick smack on the hand. Don't do that. You don't have to shout. They don't cry. They're learning by a physical effect, and it is effective. And if they then went on to it, you'd have to do it a bit harder. But there is a point at which they will stop. You've only got to look at a badly behaved child. It's usually a bad-tempered child. Whereas when a child knows that he isn't allowed to quarrel and constantly say, I want, it settles down to being cooperative and nice, and they're much happier. Same as children prefer strict teachers that make them produce their best work. It's just the same. We're there to help children, and that means to help them produce their best.
Lynette's children feel that smacking was an important part of family discipline and regard it as a healthy and natural part of growing up. There's now a new generation to discipline, because Anna, the eldest daughter, has married.
You are now a mother, little Mary Lou there, making her feelings felt. Will you slap her?
I mean, I wouldn't just sort of go up and slap her for something she did wrong. I would sort of say, well, you know, don't do that. And if she proceeded to be cheeky, which, you know, or proceeded to do it, I think I would smack her.
Griffin, now 17, has a vivid memory of one incident when he was 11.
Well, we did a comprehension at my junior school on shoplifting, and me and 2 other boys thought it'd be a good crack to go and try it out, you know, inspired by this thing. So we went out to town and did some shoplifting, and then we did some more. It was good fun, actually. It's all exciting and everything. And then we got caught.
One of the other children's parents had phoned me up and said, "This is dreadful." We were terribly shocked, obviously, and we sort of sat down with him, tears all round. I mean, he boo-hoo-hooed all over the place. How could you? It never occurred to me at that time to smack him, because my mother always used to say, you smack children for things that don't matter, for the things that do. You've got to talk and find out what's going on.
My mum lectured me for hours. But see, it was so long, it was just like, it got boring after 30 seconds. And I ended up thinking, well, what can I go and do this afternoon?
Then a month later, Bromine, I found he'd done exactly the same again with the same group of boys. So I thought, right, that's it. And at that time, my husband gave him 4 or 5 good whacks. Now, that was the end of that.
I thought it was severe at the time, 6 of the best thing. And I didn't do it again after that because, you know, that hurt.
Lynette believes that it was the smack that made Riffin see sense and stopped him getting into deeper trouble.
Thank you.
Okay, then. A child's capacity for wreaking havoc increases with its size. But as far as a whack and personal pain, he said that was the end of it. And he said, I knew I would never take anything again.
Well, all very well, Professor Heuser, but the parents would have been breaking the law in many countries.
Well, certainly they would in Sweden, which passed a law in '79 that prohibits all physical punishment of children, and now similar laws also in Finland, Denmark, Norway, and Austria. And Germany is considering such a law, just as you are here in Britain.
And you think that's right?
Well, I think it's right. In the case that we just saw of Griffin, probably what would have happened in Sweden is a different kind of punishment. People and parents in all of these countries think that children need discipline, but they just feel that it should not be a physical kind of penalty. And probably in Sweden, the parent would have done what I did when my son, who was then 12, and I'd like to say, by the way, that I am a new grandmother, and have 4 children. My claim to fame is that I had 4 children in 4 years, 3 boys. And when one of my boys, at probably the age of 12, took a candy bar from a store, I talked to the proprietor and said, what can my son do around here for 2 weeks? And in fact, for the next 2 weeks, instead of going out to play after school, he went and cleaned the parking lot at the store.
So, Mrs. Roscombs, what do you think about that? Wouldn't it have made better sense for you to have done exactly that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I really can't see there's any relevance to looking at other countries. I think it was the minister, David Mellon, that said if we'd followed Sweden in the last war, we'd all be living under Nazism now. I mean, the Swedes are a different people from us. They haven't had a war for 150 years. They're highly biddable, pacifistic people. You might as well say arranged marriages work for Indians, therefore we ought to import it here. We're talking about our culture, our traditions, something tried and tested over generations, largely by women. I not only think it's an insult to our culture, but an insult to women to suppose they're so stupid they need legislation to tell them how to bring up their own children.
Mrs. Burrows, I called you Mrs. Roscombs. Apologies, Mrs. Burrows, yeah.
Am I allowed to
Go on, yes,
interrupt
Mrs.
there?
Roscombs.
That is just such an insult to our capacity as human beings who are still evolving. We are not cavemen anymore.
Well, you may feel you're evolving. I don't feel I'm evolving. I feel I'm an adult, mature woman, perfectly capable of deciding what I want to do with my children. As you are for yours, I wouldn't dream of imposing it on you.
We do not own our children. They own themselves. We have a duty to them. We do not have a right to them.
No,
they are entitled to be brought
to do with what you're talking about. It's just purely educating their aggressive instincts that they're born with. Those instincts can't be ignored. They won't go away. You can see in this little boy.
You can channel them into education. You can channel them into sports. What you cannot do is say, don't be aggressive. Here, have a smack.
Now, Mrs. Burrows, you were saying in this little boy. Which little boy did you have in mind?
I was talking about
James.
James there, yes, who is a child with a strong character. I feel infinite sympathy for him. It's an awful pity, I think. He will obviously go all through his school career in hot water because nobody has said, thus far, no further. End of argument, sunshine.
Well,
He'd be an ideal little boy if that was ever said to him, but you lack the confidence, which I think is an awful pity. You probably also have a full-time nanny, so you don't have to bear the brunt of what he's actually like, as your husband does.
Let's give the Edwards a chance to reply to that. Mrs. Edwards?
No, I don't have a full-time nanny. In fact, I've just gone back to work and I'm working a morning, probably a week, and my mother looks after him.
But what about the points that Mrs. Burrows is making about you actually, in a sense, letting down James?
I have smacked him on 3 occasions when, I mean, I feel very ashamed I smacked him because I lost control to a certain extent. I didn't hit him hard, but it had absolutely no effect. So I don't think you can say that it's a short, sharp shock. And the basis...
There's no way round to hit him when you've lost control. He shouldn't be able to drive you like that. You are an adult. You're entitled to certain freedom and pleasure in living. I've never lost control with my children, and I think it's interesting that American research at Iron Boehmrind, which was a very large thing, showed that it was parents like yourselves who never used any physical force against their children, who, when questioned, said they felt most likely to damage their children in a temper, because they...
When I say I lost control, I don't mean I battered him. I gave him one smack on the hand.
All right. Yeah. Professor, what is the alternative? There's a clear case here from Mrs. Burrows that James should have the odd whack.